Hey everyone, it's Ellis, and this is going to be the Samira. I do not know, and I think that that means that many people are about to be upset, and that's totally fine. So, it's going to be a little bit of a work in progress. So, I initially did not want to look at this champion after I felt like I missed the mark on when she was initially released, but Riot ended up releasing the abilities rundown just a couple of hours ago, and so I figured, you know what, let's just dive right in. I've seen some clips on Twitter that have basically made some highlight reels. Obviously, we've seen that Samira has to have a very overloaded passive to make up for the fact that she's probably just not as good as Udyr, and I think that makes a lot of sense. All right, let's get into it. So her passive is Daredevil Impulse, chaining non-repeating abilities and basic attacks increase Samira's style grade by one letter from E to S rank. Every style grade gives her bonus movement speed. Samira can also damage enemies at range with her guns or with her sword in melee range, the latter dealing bonus magic damage. Samira can juggle enemies who are movement impaired by her allies. Can also juggle enemies who are movement impaired by her allies in the air, extending the displacement. Okay. Uh. What? Why is this a thing? What? What a nuts passive. Okay. Q, Flair. Samira fires a shot at her enemies directly when at range with her guns. Enemies in melee range will instead be damaged by a slash of her sword. Okay. So this is definitely a interesting new spin on a champion that has multiple abilities depending on the proximity that she is to the enemy champion that she casts it on. I think this is a very nice thing to do. Obviously, it's different than, say, Elise or Jace or something of that nature, but obviously very basic here with her Q. There's nothing really too complex to it, so I'm not really thinking anything. It does seem like there is some AoE. Blade Whirl. Samira slashes the area around with her sword, damaging enemies in the vicinity twice and destroying enemy missiles in the area at cast and to enter the area after the fact. Okay, so it's a superior wind wall is what I'm getting at, pretty much. As yeah, it's just a better wind wall. I don't understand. Then she moves in on you, can suspend you in the air, and then on top of that start gaining bonus movement speed, because Lilia and Hecarim, they weren't enough, but now we're just going to combine this with Yasuo. So it does seem like Yasuo maybe did end up having a child somewhere along the way. That's what I'm actually getting at here. Wild Rush, okay. Samira dashes through an enemy or ally, dealing magic damage to any enemy passed through and gaining bonus attack speed for a duration. Takedowns of enemy champions reset Wild Rush's cooldown. What is going on? Okay. I just don't understand. So it looks like she's an assassin that has the ability to randomly go ranged, and she has a lot of setup with her teammates given her passive and the movement speed. I'm wondering if she's able to jungle or if Riot's going to force her into the marksman role, because it seems like she has a lot of AoE on her abilities and she has good gap close. Our Inferno Trigger. Samira unleashes a torrent of shots from her weapons, wildly attacking any enemies around her 10 times over a duration. Each shot deals physical damage, applies lifesteal, and can critically strike. Samira can only cast Inferno Trigger if her current style grade is at S, the max grade. Okay, so there's a mini game going on with it, where her R is gated by her ability to maintain the S passive, so you're not just going to be able to run in and cast this whenever. It does seem like this ability is obviously pretty bonkers, and she has a massive amount of gap close. So immediately I just think that the champion is definitely going to be viable. I don't know if Riot, again, is going to force her to be a marksman, but given everything that she has going on with the gap closing, the sticking, the AoE, and everything, you do have to ask yourself if she's going to be a jungler, if she's going to end up in top lane, mid lane, or if they're somehow going to really force the issue for her to end up in the marksman role. I don't know how this is going to really be able to be balanced, given the complexity of her kit is balanced around proximity, and that's going to make things very awkward, in addition to the fact that she has a reliance somewhat on teammates. so I'm not totally sure what is going on there, but this champion definitely seems very, very exciting. It feels like something like Yasuo meets Lilia, or Yasuo meets Hecarim or something. It's a very bizarre combination of things. Now, obviously, when you're looking at this, the champion doesn't seem bad at all. It normally kits like that are super overloaded, there's some sort of weakness or downside to it. And I guess you could say that the ultimate having to be activated via the passive is one of the downsides, but the W is absolutely insane. The E is a really, really nice gap close, and then obviously takedowns resetting this is super insane. So this just looks like what the Katarina rework should have been. So perhaps her and Katarina are enemies or something. That's the only thing that I can imagine. But it does seem interesting that we're getting quite a few dittos this year, in the sense that we have Yone now with Yasuo, and now this champion is obviously very akin to Katarina, probably in her playstyle, even though she's taking abilities and passives from some other champions that I've already mentioned, obviously. And I have a bit of difficulty imagining how we're going to go about this. I don't know what the itemization is going to be like for her. We'll have to see her ratios and her numbers. This is a champion that definitely could be very clunky, but given that, again, she has the option to go into range form, I wonder how that actually helps her inside of laning phase or transitions into mid and late game, or with her scaling capacity. I'm also not sure how certain items work on her that are normally only able to be purchased by melee champions, or just different items, I guess, like rapid fire cannon or something like that. How is she going to actually utilize her crit? And if she even wants to go down the crit path or get eye edge, that means that her build is probably going to be a lot more heavy. Whereas if she's able to just get lethality, then things are definitely going to be a lot better. With the way that she is looking, lethality items maybe are very oppressive with her. If she manages to get ahead in the lane, serrated Dirk recalls can become very strong. Without seeing her numbers, though, it's really hard to say. This champion looks like it is going to be facing the same problems that Katarina has, and I know that I'm stuttering a lot, and it's because I'm trying to envision a lot of team fights or scenarios that you replace various assassins with Samira, rather than having Yasuo, rather than having a Kiana, rather than having a Zed. Or what I'm trying to imagine is, how is she going to play as the marksman for one of her teammates? And in that regard, I guess it's more of an assassin version of Kai'Sa, whereas Kai'Sa has still a lot of utility and mobility. Samira, on the flip side, is just going to be able to offer a little bit more raw damage, and so perhaps she'll end up slotting in that way. I guess if she's down there in bottom lane, she can be really scary with kill supports. Perhaps her numbers are pretty insane. Blade Whirl probably has a lot of oppressiveness down in bot lane as well, especially with the way that the meta is right now. I could see this being very, very effective. Her ultimate is obviously pretty insane. The radius on it looks extremely healthy. All in all, I think that this champion looks really, really cool, and I think that Riot's been doing a really, really good job with a lot of their latest releases. Lilia, I think, is a pretty big success. Yone is very, very nice. However, we're not going to be able to see him at Worlds. Samira is going to probably have to wait until next year, unless we get to see some amateur tournament maybe later in the year, or perhaps Tyler 1 Championship Series. We could end up seeing her, I suppose, come out in that, but outside of that, it's going to be a while until we see her in competitive. Her Q is by far the most lackluster of all of her abilities, but this is the one that really just makes me think that she can jungle, because of the size of that AoE is just really, really scary. And then given her passive, obviously, we've already talked about that. I feel like those are the really two main things that are making me think about it there. Doesn't seem like there's too much else to really go into with this champion. Pretty honest, and what I mean by that is that there's not a whole lot of trickery or smoke and mirrors. I'm unsure what the radius is when she switches into melee, though, so I guess there's also a minigame for her opponents, if they're trying to keep her in melee range as opposed to letting her go into range, or if they're intentionally trying to keep her in ranged form, but I'm not totally sure what would be the upside of that. I think that W probably has to have a really high cooldown. Q is going to obviously be her spammable ability, and then E is going to be hyper situational. And with a kit like this, I can see her going pretty much every lane except for support. So I have no idea how Riot's going to actually balance this. No matter what, though, I'm super excited. I've heard about the marksman that was supposed to be melee range. I think it was like a Reddit post, right, a couple of years ago about it. Thought that was going to end up being what later became to be Senna, especially when she was initially leaked and it looked like she had this giant blade. And I thought that was going to be the initial first coming of it. We also know that Riot has tried to make a marksman carry or something in the past. Wasn't that what Atrox's identity was supposed to be? Or maybe I'm totally missing something. I think that they wanted Atrox to be a ranged melee type of carry. I could be totally wrong there. No matter what, it looks like Samira is going to slot into that pretty well. I'm looking forward to playing her. Riot with another pretty good release.